back with another prediction for week 1. So I know y'all already saw the last one, predicted that Georgia versus Oregon game. We know Georgia's going to win that, but I'm telling y'all, you better watch Oregon because Oregon's defense is going to be real nasty. But today's topic, Notre Dame is traveling they Irish asses to Ohio State. Bring the heat. All right, y'all, so let's go ahead and pop it off. So I got me some notes written down here, so bear with me. But let's see how these two teams are going to match up with each other. So Ohio State, they went 11-2 with losses to Oregon, second week of the season, and then a loss to Michigan in one of their biggest rivalry of the season. A tough loss, but Michigan manhandled their asses. But they bounced back with a win against Utah, who pushed them to the brink. So let's go ahead and dive into a little bit more. So like I said, they went 11-2. Losses to Oregon Ducks and the Michigan Wolverines, with the loss of Oregon was a 35-28. Shocker to me. I'm surprised. That was a 12 noon game. Oregon came in there and beat them, but Oregon ends up losing their little season. And then they lose to Michigan 42-27. Michigan had a field day with them, running up and down the field on them with that nasty running back game going. There was nothing Ohio State could do against Michigan. I mean, Michigan came in there ready. It was at Michigan, snowy day. Stadium was rocking. That defense was nasty with Aiden Hutchinson and David Ochoa. All right, now, so moving on over to Notre Dame. Notre Dame didn't have such a bad season. It just wasn't the season that they expected. Finished 11-2 with losses to Cincinnati and losses to Oklahoma State in that Fiesta Bowl, which that one was a shocker. I mean, Notre Dame was doing their thing, holding no boys, and then Oklahoma State said, slow your roll. This is the Big 12. We got the defense for you. Let's go ahead and win this game. And then they end up losing 35-37. But those are their big games from what they did last year. But let's see what they're going to do 2022 season. Notre Dame, let's start off with them. So they're coming off with a new head coach, Marcus Freeman, who had previous runs at Cincinnati as a defensive coordinator, made that an elite defense, came to Notre Dame for one season, and ended up getting promoted after Brian Kelly went down to LSU to go coach those Tigers. But let's look at their rankings. So Notre Dame finished 8th in the AP poll, if that even matters, but they finished 8th in the AP poll, which isn't bad. Top 10 team. Serve you right. But the rankings, offensive-wise, they were ranked 45th. We talking about total offense. So don't you come jumping in my comments talking about, well, they were better than that. I don't want to hear it. We're talking about total offense. It's total offense and total defense. So total offense with Notre Dame, they were ranked 45th. 45th with 426 yards per game. And in their defense, they came in 43rd. Goodness gracious. Came in 43rd with 360 yards per game. So, Notre Dame got a lot to work on for this Ohio State game. But let's slide on over to Ohio State, see what they're working with, because we know what their offense did, because their offense was definitely number one as total offense with 562 yards per game. Man, that Ohio State offense was just nasty. Garrett Wilson. You see what I'm saying? They just Chris Olave, Chimba. I mean, we could just name them off. We'll get to them in a later. We're going to roll to them, but we're going to get to them boys. But let's stick to who we were going with. But like I said, Ohio State had the number one total offense in the country. And they were ranked, they finished their ranking with six in the AP poll. So not too bad of a season, like I said. But defensive-wise, shattered. The floor fell from up under them. 59. They were tied 59. They were tied with Middle Tennessee. They gave up 373 yards per game. They're just, that defense was a struggle. All right, that defense was definitely a struggle. We're just talking about, they were ranked 59. for Ohio State to do better for what they did last year with the expectations. The expectation that they should have this year is being in the playoffs no matter what. Now they got a good addition to the new defensive coordinator who they stole from Oklahoma State. Can he come in there in one season and change that up? That's a tall task. Yes, your offense is going to be good, but you're asking for that defensive coordinator to come in and change that whole culture around in one season. That's a tall task, but let's keep it moving and let's see what all they had coming back on the returning players that lost for both Notre Dame and Ohio State, and then we'll go ahead and keep rolling into my prediction. All right, so Notre Dame only had 2 players drafted in the 22 NFL draft. That tells you a lot. That speaks a lot to the volume of where that school was at. I mean, that school did very well draft in their recruiting class. Brian Kelly is not a bad head coach. All right, I think there's a lot that goes on in Notre Dame that I don't think a lot of people understand. There's a lot that, that the boosters, the presidents, all there, they want to hold a certain standard. So there's just things that Brian Kelly couldn't do. Now, they might change that around with Marcus Freeman so they can keep up with the time if they want to continue to stay relevant. But, 2 players drafted, that's not a good look for Notre Dame. But the 2 players drafted was Kyle Hamilton, nasty safety, first-round pick, 14 to the Baltimore Ravens. If I'm correct, he was the first corner to come off that board. So, hey, and that defense was ranked, what again? 43rd with Kyle Hamilton. Man, you know what they're going to do. They might just take a nosedive this year. But I don't know. Don't come at me, Irish. I'm not the one who ranked you. But then, they got Kyle Williams, 5th-round pick to the Rams. He was decent. Not going to really, pump him up like he was a elite running back. He just wasn't an elite running back. But, he did his thing. He did his part for that team. And then Jack Cohn, who really didn't even get drafted. He ended up signing with Indianapolis Colts as an undrafted free agent. And Jack Cohn, got to remember, Jack Cohn came from Wisconsin. He didn't do too bad at Wisconsin. He was just behind somebody else. And then when he came to Notre Dame, he didn't do too bad with Notre Dame. It's just that there's just a lot of things that Jack Cohn could and can't do. He's not an elite. He's not your C.J. Stroud. He's not your Bryce Young. A lot of these elite quarterbacks out here in the college world right now, it's just not matching up with them, So there's a lot he had to, there's a tall task he was asking Jack Cohn to do. All right, but that's who they lost. Key players that they lost, really isn't a lot, but returning, they got some offense going on. That offensive line is going to be real good. Notre Dame shouldn't have nothing to worry about. So Jared Patterson, the center, Blake Fisher, the right tackle, Joe Alt, the left tackle, Logan Diggs, the running back, and the tight end, Michael Mayer is the tight end that's returning. So they got some pretty good key returners for them for this season. How will those key returners pan out in Marcus Freeman's first year as a head coach? Who knows? But let's keep it rolling with Ohio State. Ohio State, their key losses. This is why they call Ohio State the wide receiver ghost. Like that's wide receiver you. That's just who they are, man. They're producing, elite talent coming out of that school back to back. It's just, look at it. Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, both of those 2 were first-round picks, y'all. 2 first-round wide receiver picks. That's nasty. Then you got Nicholas, I'm sorry, I'm gonna damage your name. Pete Freary, he's an offensive tackle. He got drafted. And then you got Jeremy Rucker, nasty tight end. If y'all don't know who Jeremy Rucker is, go look him at his highlights. You sleeping. Because if you know Brock Bowers, you should know Jeremy Rucker. He did very well at Ohio State. But let's look at their returners. This pisses me off because I'm a Georgia fan and just seeing all this talent, man. Jackson Smith and Nick Butt. If you didn't see what he did against Utah in that Rose Bowl, man, just go look at the highlights of that Rose Bowl. Jackson Smith and Nick Butt, I don't even know his stats that he did that day, but he lit up the scoreboard. Wide receiver returning, Travion Henderson, running back, 5-star returning. You got C.J. Stroud, high 4-star quarterback returning. Then you got Zach Harrison, defensive end. Then you got Luke Waller, offensive lineman. Then you got DeJuan Jones, offensive tackle, and Paris Johnson Jr., offensive tackle. So they look, man, Ohio State, they're fine. It's just, what do else, like, the only thing that's going to kill Ohio State is, what are their defensive players going to do this year? Are we going to get the same Ohio State that we got last year that couldn't stop gum off a shoe? Or are we going to get Ohio State's defense that we know from years ago? Remember, they produced a lot of talent. You know what I mean? Let's not sleep on Ohio State like they didn't have elite pass rushers coming out of that school that's in the NFL now. You got one at Washington right now. You got Joey Bosa. Like, they produce talent. So that's not like Ohio State didn't do anything. I just think they put a lot of work in on that offense. You know, that's just Ryan Day. He's an offensive mind head coach. He was offensive coordinator before taking the job. So he's an offensive mind head coach. But, you know, they really need to figure out what they're going to do because, yes, Notre Dame doesn't have all the key players like what Ohio State has. But one thing Notre Dame does have is that they have good talent. They have great talent. The only thing they got to work on is figure out who's going to be their real starting quarterbacks. I mean, we saw a little bit in the, in that Fiesta Bowl that they gave up to Oklahoma State, which didn't make sense to me. But we see what they have. And I mean, with some of the talent they have coming back, especially the offensive line, they should be in good hands. It's just a secondary is going to be a very big question. The secondary didn't have all the talent that it did, only with Cal Hamilton. He was the lone talent from that. 2 players getting drafted from that school speaks a high volume, especially for Notre Dame, especially for with the recruiting class that they had. More players should be coming out of that school at a different level. You understand? And I just feel as if in this game, it's just one of those situations where both teams, it depends on which team shows up. If you get the Ohio State game, the Ohio State team that showed up last year against Oregon, I could see Notre Dame pulling this off. But if you get Ohio State that sit there and just mud stump Michigan State when they played them and blew them out, I want to say it was like 45-7, then that Ohio State, you got to be careful because that means that defense stepped up and that offense is just lighting up the board as always. It's just 4th of July for Ohio State every game. I'm telling you that. But in week 1, unfortunately, Notre Dame, your Irish ass is going to lose this game against Ohio State Buckeyes. You're going to Ohio State Buckeyes in week 1. That energy is going to be too much for the Notre Dame to handle. And plus, it's Marcus Freeman's new season. He's a new head coach of this team. He's going to do great. He inherited a great team, just like the Oregon's new head coach, Dan Lanning. He inherited a good team, just like Mario Cristobal. He inherited a good team. The only coach I think that didn't inherit a really good team was Lincoln Riley going to USC. But he did what he did in the transfer portal. But like I said, Ohio State, give me the O. They're going to do their thing. They're going to put up some points. Can Notre Dame match those points and keep up with Ohio State? No. I don't think there's going to be too many teams out there that can match with Ohio State. Alabama, yes. Ole Miss, we know what they can do, but they're not on the Ohio State schedule. But there's going to be some teams out there that can match with them. But in this game for Ohio State, traveling all the way to Buckeye Land, unfortunately, man, it's going to be a cold ride heading all the way back to wherever you came from. So give me Ohio State for the win. My prediction score, let's just go 45-21, and I'm out. Peace.